Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to be teaching you guys how to draw the torso, and this is I'm going to be doing a male and female version, of course, as always. And this is just the, I would say it's the ideal, not ideal, it's just kind of like what your average person will look like. Of course everybody varies, so yeah, just keep that in mind and we can always just adjust that later, which we will do. So let's start off with the guy first, because basically the girl's the same as the guy, just a little bit modified. So usually I like to do the male one first because that's, pretty much the one without a lot of modifications, I should say. So yeah, anyways, I'll start off with the guy. I am going to be drawing the head, of course. I always like to start off with the cranium, and then just for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to simplify it into an oval shape. I would say end it around where it becomes like almost halfway or a little bit below that. If you want, you can even add the brow ridge, which is a little bit above that, and then maybe the eye line, which is about halfway, and then the nose, which is about halfway from the eye line to the chin. So you can also add in the nose, which I will symbolize with a little triangle. That's pretty clear, I hope. Let me go ahead and put this more towards the middle there. So when it comes to the torso, what we of course want to do first is put in our proportions. Now when it comes to our proportions, if you remember, from the bottom of the nose, 1 hand length down is the pit of the neck. Maybe a little bit longer. Actually, I think that's a pretty good length. Let me go ahead and just do that again though. Maybe put it somewhere in the middle, just approximately, just because I want to give a good amount of length for the neck to come across through. So yeah. Then we're gonna go one hand across clavicle, one hand across for the other side of the clavicle. Do the best you can. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, one hand down, sternum. And it takes time to really get this. It takes time to pretty much get the approximation correct. Just try your best and there's no pressure at all. So once you have your sternum, 90 degree for your rib cage. One hand, one hand. We can even add the rib cage just very, very lightly in here as well. And of course, we can also symbolize this as a box. And then just make sure that these two boxes are relatively even. So as you can see, approximately I would say this actually needs to be a little bit bigger. So let's do that. So sometimes you want to just measure it real quick. Okay, now we can draw the center line. And divide this box, this bottom box, by about half. And that's your pelvis. So I'm just doing the torso area, but the pelvis will be included. 3-finger gap. Then your pelvis or your pubic area here for the guy. So far so good? Pretty easy? Great. Now let's go ahead and add some details. So when it comes to the torso, I'm going to start from the neck down. For the neck, what you want to do is you want to make sure the neck is broad for the guy. Make sure it kind of looks almost like a little bit of like a tree stump. But you want to make sure that you have your, make sure it still kind of flows nicely. So what I'm adding right now is what's called the sternocleidomastoid, which is basically the neck muscle that you can see very, very distinctly when somebody turns their head. You can see this kind of really nice, large muscle. And it's actually a lot bigger than you think. It's actually like pretty wide. I would say it starts wide first and then gets narrower. A lot of people tend to make it too thin, which is not good. You don't want it to make it look like pencils. You want it to be just to have some substance. And then on the inside here is where your Adam's apple is. You don't have to draw it though, but it's there. Then we have our trapezius, which is a back muscle that kind of overreaches on top and kind of looks like a trapezoid. That's probably why they call it trapezius. And it kind of rotates around. It doesn't fill the whole thing. This is just a more simplified version, by the way. So here is more like if you touch your neck area. You can feel the trapezius on the edge of your neck, not the edge, just on your neck, or that kind of area. And then you can feel it kind of go down, and then there's like this kind of empty spot. There's a lot more muscle in here anyway, but I'm not going to draw that because it's way too complicated and you don't need that. But anyways, let's go ahead and continue on. Here we're at the clavicle, and the clavicle has an interesting shape. It has this kind of bump towards the center, and it curls up, and then it kind of stretches out, and it has this little bump where it kind of goes back into the where it kind of goes back across the other side of the back. So let's do it on the other side. And I would say proportion is more important than anatomy, just simply because if you have all the anatomy correct but the proportions are not correct, that's a little bit of a problem. So anyways, that's that. Now when it comes to let's actually draw out the arm real quick. Let me just go ahead and kind of close off this part. Maybe I will go ahead and make his arms more stretched out just so I can see everything else there. So anyways, I'll just leave that as a little thing for now. So forearm will probably end here, and then upper arm would probably end here, and the forearm will probably be up to here. You don't have to do this. This is optional. I just like doing it because it kind of gives an easier feel. I can always fix that later. Anyways, so here we have the arms kind of blocked in roughly. Now let's go ahead and draw in the pectoralis. And the pectoralis is your big chest muscle, and that kind of crosses over and stretches underneath, kind of stretches up to the arm muscle of the deltoid. So let me draw the deltoid first, just so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Your deltoid is your very big arm muscle. And it kind of has this kind of nice and huge muscle that is very, very distinct. It also has this kind of unique shape where it's almost like it's almost like this kind of shape here. You have a top, and then you have the muscle itself. So it kind of has this nice triangular form to it. Of course, since this guy is more stretched out, it's a little bit more skewed, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. And that crosses over on top of the pectoralis. But it's just there just for reference. So there is your deltoid on both sides. And notice how I leave the bone out. That's pretty common. It's not totally like the deltoid's over on top of the clavicle. It's actually underneath it. Let me actually curve this a little bit so it's more straight. So that, and not only that, but if you look at yourself in the mirror without, I don't know, maybe just have your shoulders bare, you can sort of see a bone coming out from there. That's the clavicle and a little bit of the scapula. So here we have the pectoralis, which is about a little bit above the sternum. And that goes underneath. That goes underneath the deltoid and the clavicle. You can leave the sternum kind of bare because that's kind of like a bone point, a bony area. So you want it that does not have muscle in it. This looks a little bit uneven, so I'm going to fix that here. There. I think that looks better. Checking the camera. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. I would still tone it down a little bit though. That should be good enough. This is your pectoralis. If you want to add some form to that, you can. It's kind of just more like muscle tissue going to a certain point. I would say towards the end point here. Now, for the rib cage, let's start off with our latissimus dorsi, which is the back muscle that comes around and kind of creates this nice, triangular shape to the torso. Whoops. Bump my camera a little bit. That's your latissimus dorsi, and a little bit in between is your serratus muscles. Which I would just put in right there. And they kind of have this nice avocado slice look to it. You don't have to do this obviously, but it almost kind of look like avocado slices here. So they kind of look like they're blending in. I would also round this out because this is not the rib cage here. This is the muscle that is going to come right after, which is our rectus abdominis. In a way, it's sort of like a little sheath. Start from the rib cage down, and then have it all the way down up to the pubic bone. That's why I draw the pubic area as well. From here, resting on top of the pelvis is our external obliques, which are these outer muscles that lay on top. Now let's draw in the abs. Now a lot of people do abs sort of similar to something like this, which you should not do. So they have like the abs here, and then they just do this. Don't do that. That's not how you should do the abs here. So abs, no, don't do that, because that's not showing any form. That's just making a little chart. What you want to do is understand the muscles. So we can group these into 4. That's why there are people who have 8 packs. So one is a small one up at the top. Oops. Leave some space as well. So we have one set, second set, third set, this is all simplified, by the way, not necessarily always accurate, but it does the job enough that you guys can understand what the placement of the muscles are. And then here's the fourth set, which goes down the pubic bone, down the pubic area. So that is your upper muscle, your torso. Now let's go ahead and draw the female version. So I'm going to slide my sketchbook this way, and what I'm going to do is erase this part so I have enough room for the lady. So the lady is also pretty simple. First we want to start off with drawing our head. Let's make her a little bit shorter. So cranium and her head. Eye line, nose line. One hand down, pit of the neck. One hand across, more straight, I would say. Clavicle, clavicle. One hand down, sternum. One hand down, more inclined, is her rib cage, and the other hand as well. This might be a little bit too high, too low, so I'm gonna make it a little bit higher. So this is also a little bit too acute, so I'm going to make it just a little bit wider. One. Make sure it's not 90 degrees, it's more of a 60 degree. That looks good. Let's lightly draw in her rib cage, and then draw in the 2 boxes. So one box, second box, approximately divide this in half is your pelvis. So once again, you know, similar proportions, just will have a little bit of a different look. In fact, what I'm going to do for this one instead is I'm going to make this a little bit more outward here, because girls tend to have bigger hips. I should have used my kneaded eraser, but sometimes I forget to. So once again, same drill. Let's start off with her, actually let's give her some arms, more facing down. And I'm going to erase this because we don't need that anymore. Let's start off with her neck, same thing. Make sure her neck isn't too broad. In this case, we want her neck to be a bit more slender. So rather than like something so angular, we want it to make it more have more curves basically. So here we have our sternocleidomastoid. We have the pit of her neck. She doesn't really have an Adam's apple, but it's there anyway. Then we have the trapezius, which is, I would make for artistic purposes a bit smoother, so we can see the difference more. Trying to make sure that this doesn't look too tilted. Alright, that's good enough. Then here we have the trapezius kind of ending up here. Then we have the clavicle. I think it's so interesting that we have subtle differences. I think it just makes us more interesting, you know, makes everybody more interesting because everybody's kind of different in their own way, but but pretty much very similar because we're all human. Philosophy aside, let's go ahead and add in the deltoid. Deltoid, same thing, you know, I would make it just a little bit more slim, just to differentiate between the male as well. And that is going over the underneath it's going underneath the clavicle. Here I'm just drawing in the arms just very simply. So of course, if this girl does not have any breasts or is very flat, she won't have much fat pad around the breast area. She'll just kind of look more masculine like this. So again, everybody has these same muscles, just everybody has a different kind of way of how their body is like. So some people have more of a toned body when they work out, or even naturally sometimes. Sometimes they're more naturally leaner. Some people have to, of course, work out to be more fit, and some can appear more scrawny, and some can appear a bit more well-endowed. So that's all just genetics. But anyways, let's go ahead and start off with her pelvis, or not her pelvis, her pectoralis, which is, you know, the same thing, but I'm going to add breasts to this. So first we want to draw in the pectoralis, which will be underneath the deltoid. And I'm making this all just a little bit softer for artistic reasons, just because I want to make sure that I see the difference between this one and this one. Pectoralis is, I think it's just a little bit above the sternum, or if not around the same level as the sternum, whichever it is. Either way, we'll find out later. So here I'm just going to erase this light line here just because I want to add in the breasts. So here I'm just going to add a little bit of the muscle. And a lot of people think like, oh, the breast is like the entire pectoralis. It's not. The breast is a big fat pad. So that kind of rests underneath, kind of lower, around the lower regions of the pectoralis. So the pectoralis is quite visible until it starts sloping into a breast. So it would look more like flat here, and then it rounds out. Of course, that depends on how big it is. You can make it as big as you want. Just make sure you don't go overkill, or else that'd just be very impractical for the girl that you're drawing. So I'm just going to draw, you know, pretty average ones. Oh, if you want, you can also add the nipples. if you want to describe what if I could describe what the breasts kind of look like, they kind of look like teardrops. They're kind of just relax onto relax from the sternum. So I'm just gonna add nipples here. Actually, that looks a bit. I'm not gonna make this too. I'm just gonna make this light, so it's there, but it's not totally in your face. I don't feel comfortable drawing this sometimes. It's okay, whatever. Now, once again, we have our lats. Okay, we have our arms. Since our arm is kind of more in front now, this time rather than outstretched like that, it will kind of be more closed in. Here we have the lats, and I'm just going to make this a little bit more smaller. I'm not going to make it super winged out like that. From here, on the inner parts of the rib cage, is your serratus, which are the little avocado slices. And I'm just adding them very carefully because I don't want this to all look too super muddy. I'm just adding that quite delicately. And for women, we have fat pads that are along the rectus or along our abdominal area. The majority of the fat pad starts coming from the lower area here. That's why we have bigger hips. And for guys, it's more in the belly area. So for the abdominal regions, same thing. We still have our sheath area here. But I'm going to add a bit of a fat pad on top. So I'm just going to simplify it by adding this round bit here. And we have something called the hip dip, which is our obliques go down from the pelvis. And then we have our leg area here, but we're not going to go through that until later. Now, if you didn't notice already, this is why the female pelvis, female torsos tend to be longer, and then the legs tend to be shorter. For the guy, the torso area tends to be a little bit shorter, and the knee and the legs longer. So that's why when I draw this, I make sure that I elongate her torso just a little bit more. And I'm not going to add too much abs, although I know it's there. This is just for simplification. So here, once we have our abs, we have our fat pad down here. You don't have to draw all of this. I'm just telling you what's underneath and what muscles we have. In fact, I would group these into two parts as well. Or not, maybe not, just for the sake of comparison, I won't. So anyways, that is our torso area for both male and female. Let me know what you guys think, and I hope that this helped a bunch for you guys to understand what it looks like. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.